Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Tuesday, September 21st, 2021. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Democrats face a government shutdown and debt ceiling within 10 days. An attempt to pass a bill with both today, it's going to fail. Spoiler alert. Also, the so-called bipartisan infrastructure bill and the reconciliation bill on a collision course. Biden administration expands refugee cap to 125,000 for fiscal year 2021. However, continues to expel suffering Haitian migrants. Despite the end of extended unemployment, there's no bump in job applications. COVID has now killed as many Americans as the 1918 pandemic. That said, there was about a third the same amount of Americans at that time, but nevertheless, FDA to make a decision on booster shots this week. Pfizer reports vaccines work well in children 5 to 11, and new data shows that the J&J vaccine works even better with a booster. In Canada, Trudeau's gambit put him exactly where he was, -1, as the NDP gets a small gain, but still forming a minority government up in Canada. Department of Justice seeks to join oral arguments for the Supreme Court's Mississippi Roe v. Wade case in December. Meanwhile, first lawsuits tendered under Texas's abortion ban. Joe Biden addressed the UN today, announces for the first time in 20 years, we're no longer at war. Asterisk. Kinetic activity. And lastly, we will hear from the executive director of the New York Taxi Workers Alliance, Bhairavi Desai, who will tell us of the plight of New York cab drivers who've basically been abandoned by New York City's Medallion program. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Joining me, as always, Emma Vigeland. Hello, Emma.
Hello, Sam.
We've got a lot to get to today, Emma, and we're going to be talking to this executive director of the New York Taxi Workers Alliance. We've got updates on some strikes around the country that have been going on in some instances for months, multiple months. We've got to cover the debt ceiling, which is supposedly 10 days away. The potential for a government shutdown, also about 10, 14 days away. We've got the battles between the corporate Democrats and the centrists in the party, Joe Biden in the leadership, and the progressives over the reconciliation budget bill and the bipartisan framework bill. And we also have reports on the horrible scenes that we have seen down in Texas with these Haitian migrants who have been now just expelled from the country under Title 42, which is a rule that the Trump administration employed to basically just get rid of people seeking some type of refuge, asylum, migration to this country without any type of process. And so we've got all that to get to and more, frankly. And and
we shall.
And we will. Yeah, let's do. Here's Jen Psaki. Now, we played some of the images yesterday of these Border Patrol agents riding horses and there are up to 15,000 Haitian immigrants who...
Asylum seekers, I feel like, is better.
Well, they're not being... that we don't know, right? I mean, because they're not even being processed. But they are... we do know that Haiti has suffered 2 massive natural disasters and a political upheaval in the past 2 months.
One would think that would qualify you for asylum status, regardless of the United States' very active role in that political destabilization historically.
Right. And at the very least, you'd get temporary protected status.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's what this is for.
But the pandemic.
Well, and so we have, they ended up basically crossing the border. We have images yesterday of some Haitians who had crossed the border to get food in Mexico and then came back to feed their families and were basically corralled by these horseback customs and border patrol agents who were yelling at them that they come from a S-hole country and were basically taking the lanyards from their horses and whipping them.
Right.
Here is Jen Psaki on CBS's This Morning with talking about and trying to justify those scenes.
Into that, people may be eligible for that. But right now, we also have to implement our laws at the border. We also want to protect people, both in that community, but also migrants. One of the challenges, as we're all facing a pandemic here, is the gathering of so many people. We're still implementing Title 42, which means that we are going to send people out of the country who come in as we implement that.
A COVID safety protocol.
Exactly.
But did you say that it's possible that that extension that applies to Haitians already here could apply to those coming across the border?
Well,
now?
Tony, it's already been extended because of the turmoil on the ground. It was earlier this summer. That's something that the Secretary of Homeland Security and Secretary of State do look into. But again, as we look to the photos, not just the ones you referenced, but of all of these families and people under the bridges, we wanted to also take steps to implement our laws and to protect a lot of them from the spread of COVID as well.
You know, there's a lot of incoming, Jen, at the White House these days. What will be the...
It's so disingenuous. So we want to protect them by... She's not sanctioning it, but she didn't say anything there. Like, these guys cosplaying as overseers, these Border Patrol agents, literally using these lanyards as, like, whips and cudgels against these families.
And let's be clear here. When she cites Title 42, I don't know if at any point during that broadcast they made it clear that a judge basically enjoined the administration from using Title 42 5 days ago, and the Biden administration then is on appeal. So this is something that's very likely to be struck down. We don't know for sure, but is dubious at best. And certainly when Donald Trump had initiated, I mean, this is one of those opportunities where Jen Psaki could say, the Donald Trump initiated Title 42. Mm-hmm. The other thing is that according to reporting by Julia Ainsley, NBC reporter, in an effort to speed up deportation, she said on Twitter last night, ICE is no longer testing for COVID before flights. So they're on one hand claiming that we're getting people out, we're deporting these people. It's not even deportation, right? Because there's no process. We are expelling these people who are coming from a devastating situation in their home country, ostensibly to protect them from COVID. So what we're doing is we are gathering them up. We're putting them on planes. We're not testing anybody. And then putting them back into a situation where there's far less services for COVID. I mean, if you really want to protect these people from COVID, everybody should be getting a shot. and everybody should be getting tested, and they should be allowed to. We should find a place for them. We should start to process them in this country. I mean, it's just unbelievable, and it couldn't be more inhumane.
I'm on the CDC website. Which vaccines are required for U.S. immigration? Mumps, measles, rubella, polio, hepatitis A, hepatitis B, just a variety of ones. I'm listing some of them that are required for U.S. immigration. They could just give these migrants, or I should say asylum seekers, I know that the classification, I just want to be as specific as possible. They can just give them the one-shot COVID vaccine right there if they're that concerned about their safety. But it's just like this disingenuous kind of way to use fears about the pandemic to shut down the conversation, when what they're saying there is they could be infected with COVID, right? It's a little downstream from, aren't they just kind of dirty people from different countries? So she's just using a more distilled version of that incredibly racist argument while using the racist policy of Donald Trump as a cover for their own politics when they ran on how cruel is Donald Trump to immigrants, how cruel is Donald Trump to people at the border. It's and no pushback by CBS. I mean, you wonder why she goes on the morning show for that kind of cover up, right? Not to besmirch all morning shows, but that's kind of the deal. So, I mean, that's a part of this this PR exercise. And speaking of a PR exercise, great timing on the New York Times' fluff piece on Jen Psaki. Wonderful stuff. Maybe we shouldn't laud liars because that's what they're paid to do when they're representing an administration.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll be talking to Bhairavi Desai, Executive Director of the New York Taxi Workers Alliance. We'll be right back after this. And by this, I mean a note from today's sponsor, who happens to be a fan and a longtime listener of the program. And he runs a solar consultant company called MySolarNerd.com.
Whoa.
MySolarNerd.com. Danny's got years of years of experience working in solar industry. And if you are a homeowner, you have probably considered solar, but you didn't know where to start. You know, maybe there's tax incentives. Maybe you don't know who to trust or what kind of system works best for you. There's a lot of homeowners that aren't aware that the solar options, of all the solar options that are currently available, it is now possible to retrofit a home with solar panels for no money down. Most homeowners that switch over to solar see significant savings starting in their first year. This is possible thanks to the Solar Investor Tax Credit. It is going away soon. My Solar Nerd's mission is simple: help you find the best solar program for your home and make the transition as easy and smooth as possible. How do they do it? They do it by A, analyzing your usage, B, finding the best equipment for your needs, C, determining the incentives and financing you may qualify for, and then they project manage the process between you and the installers. They obtain the permits, they find the tax incentives, etc. Look, do not hesitate. Some of those tax credits and incentives are sunsetting. The current 26% tax credit drops down to 22%, and then it will go away by the end of by 2023. So if a project is completed by 12/31, that homeowner qualifies for the 26% tax credit. So there's still time. Some markets are prone to power outages. You may qualify for off-grid backup solutions. MR listeners will get a $200 gift card upon installation of their solar system. Go to mysolarnerd.com, fill out the inquiry form now that they have there. Make sure that you select the Majority Report listener for how you heard about mysolarnerd.com to receive $200 a gift card upon installation. Let them know that we're sending you there. Check it out, folks. A great time to switch to solar. Okay, joining us now is Bhairavi Desai. She is the Executive Director of the New York Taxi Workers Alliance. Do we have her?
Yes, hi.
Hi, Bhairavi. I'm here with Emma Vigeland. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
will you explain to us what the situation is with the taxi drivers? Because I got to say, it sounds very similar to me as to what happened in 2008 financial crisis and the really horrible plan that was started by the Obama administration called HAMP, which basically said we're going to incentivize the banks and hope that they do the right thing. And of course they didn't.
It's exactly it. And, you know, what's happening with yellow cab drivers today in New York City is thousands of them are stuck in very high loans. The medallion, which is a number you see on top of the cab, it's a permit from the city of New York that allows you to use a yellow cab exclusively for street hail rides across the city. Well, you know, the permits are issued by the city. The city, through the years from 2002 to 2014, made $850,000 from issuing these permits. Their investigations have found that the city of New York inflated the value of the medallion. They engaged in, you know, direct mailings and phone calls and advertising to get mostly immigrant drivers to invest in the medallion. The city made its millions. Many of the banks that were no longer allowed to loan in the housing market after 2008 were rolled out a red carpet to then loan to immigrant drivers. And they made millions from the interest alone. Now that the value of the medallion has crashed from 1 million at one point to like less than 100,000 today, on average, our members are left with the debt of $550,000.
This is nuts. So I just want to be clear here. The city made how many millions of?
In a 12-year period, $850 million.
$850 million. And they did this by encouraging people to sign up to buy these medallions. And the bankers came in with a total disregard as to whether this was a good loan. And I want to be clear. There's a reason why they call bank loan officers as opposed to, you know, loan clerks. It's because they have a fiduciary duty to make sure that the loans that they are offering are able to be paid back by the taxi drivers. And so this seems like a, you know, just a this seems just like the real estate sort of a quasi fraud on some level. You're pushing these ideas that that folks are going to be able to make this money back, and then they get stuck with these medallions that are essentially underwater. And so what are the city was now guaranteeing some of these loans for the banks? Is that what it was, or what was going on with that dynamic?
So the city has come out with a grant program. And look, we've had this massive crisis. There have been 9 driver suicides. At one point, there were 900 bankruptcies. People have had liens on their homes, on their bank accounts. Owner drivers, as we call them, are among the most older drivers in the industry. This is also a senior issue. People have lost their retirement that they were banking on, when the value of the medallion crashed. And the only response the city has had is a grant program where they will grant $20,000 to the bank to use as an incentive to write down the loan. And here's the catch. The more they write down the principal, the more they're allowed to charge you on the monthly payment. So you basically get punished if you get any level of debt relief. I mean, it's insane, and it's so irresponsible. There's 6,000 families that are facing utter financial ruin. And the thing here is, not only were the regulators asleep, 7 government agencies had internal reports which found that the medallion value was being inflated, but they still allowed the auctions, the sales to happen. But it's also important to note the government here played the role of a speculator. They, publicized the rates to be higher than they knew it to be. Many of those same officials then allowed an Uber and Lyft to essentially provide the same service, but completely unregulated. And then many of those individuals went straight to work for Uber and Lyft. So their careers have taken off. The city's made its billions. The banks have made their money, but hardworking cab drivers who've given all their life, their adult life to this city, are facing ruin, and all the city wants to give them. The city of New York received $6 billion in COVID assistance. That's $2 billion above the city's deficit. The only thing they could put together is the $65 million grant program. The money goes to the banks directly, and there's no real relief in return. So we've been calling for a guarantee, because right now the loans are guaranteed by the individual. We want to remove that, because otherwise our members are facing, the loss of their homes, and, their wages could be garnished 10% for the rest of their working life. Yep. So if there's a guarantee, you remove that risk and you incentivize the banks to lower the principal and the monthly mortgage.
Okay, and the guarantee would be provided by the city, and that's
right.
And if the taxi, if the cab driver, was unable to pay, the city would get the medallion back.
Actually, the bank would get the medallion back, and they'd be able to resell it. If they don't recoup the total balance, then the city has a financial duty. Okay. Now, the thing here is, this is a strategy. It's actually very low cost. Our city controller, the chief financial officer, vetted our proposal and found it to be fiscally sound. This is a low cost and low risk proposal, that the city could do for essentially like less than a couple $1 million a year for a city with the budget of $96 billion. It's already made $850 million from the drivers. This is a fraction of a cost for the city that is directly responsible for this human crisis.
So now, my understanding is that that some of the cab drivers are now basically camping out in front of City Hall. Is that what's happening? How can what actions should we be aware of that are taking place, and what can our listeners do to help support these folks?
Well, we've been camped outside City Hall 24/7. You can come and join us. We're right on Broadway in front of City Hall. Many of our members have also been now preparing themselves for a possible hunger strike. I mean, this is the last few months of this current mayor. We have an election coming up in November, but we don't have time to wait. We're trying to stop foreclosures and bankruptcies. If the city's plan goes forward within months, you're going to see, several thousand driver families that, would have lost absolutely everything.
And is there a website that people can get more information?
Yes, we are at nytwa.org.
nytwa.org. Bhairavi Desai, Executive Director of the New York Taxi Worker Alliance. Thanks so much for coming on and telling us about this.
Thank you so much.
All right, folks, let's go right ahead. we got a lot of things to get to. We're going to talk in a moment about the reconciliation process. A lot of people keep emailing and asking, can you give them a more extensive explanation? And I can only do a limited one because it is so Byzantine. But before we get there, I wanted to just update folks on some strikes that we have been talking about over, in some instances, over the past several months. This one, the United Food and Commercial Workers in Bardstown, Kentucky, have been on strike for a week now, picketing the Heaven Hill Distillery. And it's apparently they got proposed a 5-year contract. This is there's a bunch of bourbons, I guess, made in this. I'm not sure of all of them, what are there, but we have folks on in Kentucky who are on strike. We had a caller call in, talk about the Yahtzee strike. Yahtzee is it's a broad, I guess, conglomeration of unions that work in production, and a lot of DPs and people have their own specific unions that they belong to. If they're a set designer or a production designer, or you do styling, but they're all largely, I think, under the umbrella of IATSE. And they're getting crushed in two ways. One, the working conditions are insane. And we heard from this of somebody who called in, but I experienced this, but only as an actor. And as an actor, it's not easy to be on set for 18 hours, but you get to be in your trailer, you hang out, maybe you got a TV in there if you're getting a decent enough billing, and you're you're chilling and you're going over your lines, and then you come out. Meanwhile, that entire time, you've got people who are lugging equipment, they're running around, they're building sets, whatever they're doing. And the whole point of these productions is they want to try and squeeze it in to as few days as possible. And they overwork a lot of these people. And now a lot of folks who are in IATSE, their pension and health contributions were a function of residuals. But there are fewer and fewer residuals in this business now because you have these streaming outfits like Netflix and Amazon. And so there is no residual market. So a lot of times they'll do the work, they'll get paid, but there'll be no contribution to their pensions or their health funds. And so apparently this took place, I think it was today. The AMPTP, this is the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers, informed IATSE that they do not intend to respond to IATSE's comprehensive package proposal presented to them over a week ago. And so IATSE is now seeking strike authorization from its members. We will update you on whether that happens, but this could impact TV, film production, commercial production. It could be a huge strike. Meanwhile, nurses up in Worcester, Mass. at St. Vincent, they are still on strike. This has been going on now for over 6 months.
Right.
600 nurses. They're working for a hospital up in Worcester, Mass., which, full disclosure, both my sisters were born at. And the hospital is owned by this huge Texas-based conglomerate called Tenet. They had been short-staffing the place, like a lot of these hospital companies do. And the nurses became concerned because they felt like the patients weren't getting enough attention. And I
imagine they were incredibly overworked as well.
And incredibly overworked. And so they are still on the on strike. I think Pelosi was actually up there a couple of weeks ago. Good for her. But they're out there. You can check out their strike fund. Just Google St. Vincent nurses and help them out. And meanwhile, members of the United Mine Workers of America are still on strike. Almost 1,100 members of the union have been on strike against Warrior Met coal since April 1st. So that's 6 months too. So this is so check that out. That's down in Alabama. They started striking right around the time, right after the attempt by the Bessemer Amazon workers to unionize. So check that out. They've got now state police who are escorting, I guess, scabs across the picket line. And
make sure they don't run the workers who are on strike over too.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So check that out. Just wanted to give you an update on those strikes. There are more happening around the country, but those are some of the biggest ones that we've been following. All right, let's talk a little bit about the like, I don't know, I want to say twin sort of challenges that the Democrats have, but it's more than twin.
It's more, yeah. It's
quadruplets.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Sextuplets.
All right. So look, we have there is the federal borrowing limit. And this is something that the Democrats should have gotten rid of a long time ago because the Republicans keep doing this. every now and then you'll get a member of one party or the other, the opposition party, who will vote against raising the debt limit for one reason or another. In this instance, the Republicans are basically not, they're going to completely prevent the debt ceiling from being raised because you need a majority to raise it, and you need more than a majority. I think they're basically going to try and stop. So what's happening is Democrats announced today that they're going to do both the federal borrowing limit, raise it to the end of 2022, onto a bill to keep the government funded through December, which is the continuing resolution. Meanwhile, they're trying to get through their reconciliation budget bill.
It buys them more time. It buys them more time on the debt ceiling.
And but Republicans said that they're not going to support raising the debt ceiling, and it is unlikely the two will pass. And the idea with the Democrats is they're trying to combine the two to put pressure on the Republicans, but they're not. It doesn't look like it's going to pass.
Well, they say that, right? I mean, McConnell kind of postures that when he's done this before, and like, is he gonna let the economy crash? Maybe.
Well,
maybe.
So far, there's only one Republican, John Kennedy of Louisiana, who said he would support the measure. The real problem, of course, is the Senate here. And he said, I will likely vote yes, but it's not going to pass because there won't be 10 Republican votes. Now, that indicates that the Republicans are not just not voting for it. They are, in fact, filibustering it. And they're not going to allow it to pass.
Which is my point, though, is that it's the political ramifications for that, for them, might be too much to bear when it comes down to brass tacks.
Yeah.
To filibuster it and say, oh, we're just going to shut down the government. I mean, that's going to come back to bite them, as it usually does.
And so now, in the event that they do not pass this legislation, there's only 10 days before the government funding is set to lapse. If you do not approve an increase in the debt limit, the government could default on its debt for the first time. Now, look, whenever they give a date for the debt limit to hit, basically the funds in Treasury to run out, Treasury always seems to be able to figure out a way of extending that by another couple of weeks. There's also other mechanisms. The Treasury has the ability to mint, and we haven't heard this yet. But maybe
mint the coin.
Mint the, I think it's the platinum coin. They have the ability to mint a coin in the amount of whatever they want, and $1
trillion coin, baby.
They could theoretically do that. So there are mechanisms for this, but you also need to have a continuing resolution so that government does not shut down. There needs to be. There is apparently, at least no Democrat is talking about a plan B for these two things. However, there is a way in which you could pass these two bills, and that is through reconciliation. However, the way that reconciliation works, which is the only mechanism to pass something with that is not subject to the filibuster. So you can pass it with 51 votes.
And it's pertaining to the budget, so this would fall under that.
It must pertain to the budget. However, the way that reconciliation works is that you first must pass a budget resolution, which gives the broad parameters for the what will be in that reconciliation bill. The reconciliation bill is really an aggregate of a bunch of different acts. And so when you write the budget resolution language, you could say you can borrow up to $1.7 trillion, which is what they did in this one. You could say you can't borrow anything. But they just create a framework. Why did they choose $1.7 trillion? I do not know.
But you create the framework, then move forward with the bill writing process within sticking to that framework, at least loosely.
Exactly. However, the raising of the debt ceiling and the continuing resolution are not written into that budget resolution. However, there is apparently a way in which you can amend the budget resolution. However, if you do that, you need to open up all sorts of amendments to it. Now, you remember when they did the first budget resolution, they had the vote-a-rama.
Yes.
And that allows anybody on the floor to raise amendments that they want in the bill.
They stay up all night. They throw everything at the wall. A lot of it's for their campaigns. And
right. A lot of it is to try and get, to create wedge issues. At one point, I can't remember what it was that...
Josh Hawley put up something ridiculous.
Can't teach critical race theory, whatever it is. Yeah. For some reason, and I'm not going to lie, I don't fully understand why, to rewrite the budget resolution to include both these in, and maybe it's because you're talking about two separate, distinct bills. One is the continuing resolution and one is the debt ceiling. You need to have two vote-a-ramas. So 2 nights of all-night
drink
voting.
All that Red Bull.
Exactly. And
Chuck
so
Schumer.
It is doable. Now, the advantage of doing that to the Democrats, aside from everybody having to stay up late, and there's a ton of older Democratic senators.
I wasn't aware of that.
And is that if you put the raising of the debt ceiling and the continuing resolution within the budget bill, it becomes a lot more important for someone like Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema to vote for, because if they vote against it, they are voting to shut down the government. And that means that people will be furloughed. That means that people will lose services. It is a very uncomfortable thing to be responsible for, particularly in this instance when it would be like one or two of you.
However, this would extend the infrastructure fight to question mark end of year.
This is the other sort of deadline that they're facing. Yes, I know. This is like that thing with the good news is, and then the guy falls into like a haystack, but the bad news is there was a pitchfork in there, and then the good news is that the pitchfork was bent, that type of thing.
Yeah. Right.
Several weeks ago, maybe it was a month or two ago, Nancy Pelosi agreed to a crew of, I think it was 9 corporate Democrats who, because they want things like tax breaks for wealthy people in blue states, the SALT deductions, and maybe other things, Pelosi agreed to vote on the bipartisan infrastructure bill by September 27th.
6 days from today.
6 days from today. The Progressive Caucus had said, we are not going to vote for the bipartisan bill until we vote for the reconciliation bill, because if we do, and we pass the bipartisan bill, these corporate Democrats will then sink the reconciliation bill because they don't care about that and they don't want the taxes to be raised and they don't want these other services. And we're talking about maybe 9 to 12 of these people, maybe it's really just 6 who would really vote against it. Maybe just 3, because that's all you really need, 3 or 4 in the House. And then, of course, 2 in the Senate. That's Manchin and Sinema, the ones who are squawking at that. But that, and we mentioned this yesterday in the fun half of the program, because it's so fun, the corporate Democrats threatened to vote against the reconciliation bill if the bipartisan bill is not voted on by the 27th.
Which is not going to happen. Or if it does, they'll fail.
But the bottom line is, the reason why they are insisting on the bipartisan bill to be voted on the 27th is so that they are freed up to vote against the reconciliation bill. So threatening to vote against the reconciliation bill, if they're not given the opportunity to vote against the reconciliation bill, is not a threat. You're pushing against the string there. So they're about to lose that fight, I think. Because there is no way at this point, even if they wanted to, that they're going to get this reconciliation bill.
So you think that the House conservative Democrats, at the very least, are kind of puffer fishing it? They don't really have anything behind their threat. They seem pretty serious, but the block of progressive Democrats being, close to 50. Over
there are
40.
at least 17, to my knowledge, who have publicly.
But Jayapal says half her 96-person caucus in the Progressive Caucus is going to do this. So.
But the 17 is enough because we also now know that there are no Republicans who are planning to vote for the bipartisan bill. So sometime over the next 10 days, I don't know how they get past this. I really don't know how they work it out. It doesn't sound like they have a grand plan either.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know why this keeps happening to Pelosi and Schumer. If you recall, back in 2017, they came in, and when Republicans faced this type of cliff, they just delivered them the votes. The Democrats did, and then went on to say, like, okay, let's now negotiate. And that's why we ended up getting those Republican tax cuts, because when Republicans face this kind of pressure, Pelosi and Schumer let them off the hook. They provided the votes to raise the debt ceiling. They provided the votes for the continuing resolution.
Well, they have less leash with corporate donors, and they don't want to be seen as the ones that tank the economy. Republicans are like, we're really the guys that are going to look out for your interests, so we can, play with fire all we want.
I mean, arguably, but it's also just maybe they're just bad tacticians.
There's that too. But the incentive structure also makes them bad tacticians for our purposes. Maybe not,
right.
Exactly what they are looking out for.
I mean, make no mistake about it. This is not, and you can be cynical all you want. This is not where the White House wanted to be, nor Pelosi or Schumer. They did not want this to be in jeopardy, this $3.5 trillion bill. And now Nancy Pelosi sent out a letter, a Dear Colleagues letter, last night, apparently. And it essentially said, that the differences between the House and the Senate Democrats aren't as wide as many rank-and-file lawmakers believe. This is from the Punch Bowl News. But she also had carefully worded warning to her progressive to be prepared to be disappointed by the Senate. In other words, the Senate's going to pass something at one point, and it may not be as big as you want it. She said, hopefully, there's a quote, that will be the that will be at the $3.5 trillion number. She's starting to speak of the $3.5 trillion number as a cap, as opposed to a goal.
Mm-hmm. Well, that makes sense.
Well, yes, because they're backing off. She's starting to sort of try and reset expectations. The question is, what will get cut? And there's two ways. I think we had, was it David Dayen on a couple of weeks ago to talk about the two different ways that this could go down if they cut down on that number. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, you've got 10 plans and you want to fully fund them. That's the $3.5 trillion number. You have a choice. Do you go down to 7 plans and fund them with $2.5 trillion? Or do you try and fund them all less than they really need to be funded to function properly, so that you maintain 10 plans, but you underfund all of them?
I have my fears about part one, because with Manchin getting the reward on energy and commerce in the Senate on that committee, or is it just the energy committee in the Senate? He's going to want to cut the climate provisions right away. And that's
without
necessary.
a doubt. And we know Sinema has trained her sights on the prescription drug bill. Now, that is the centerpiece of this, one of the centerpieces of this bill, because it not only lowers prescription drug prices, which is a desperately needed thing, but it also provides savings to the government, because it's Medicare negotiating these things, to the tune of something like $600 billion. $700 billion, which could then be deployed to fund other things.
It's a pay for. You're supposed to love that, Sinema.
Well.
And Kathleen Rice.
Exactly.
Right? That's the kind of Democrat they want to be. And look at that. Looks like pharma's interests get a little bit more weight.
And meanwhile, we should also say that the attempts to get some type of immigration reform are, I want to say they're being stymied, but that's really not accurate. The Democrats are choosing to allow that to be stymied. The parliamentarian has ruled that it does not belong in the reconciliation bill. Aside from the parliamentarian being a former immigration attorney who used to help deport people back in the day.
Not a Ronald Reagan flavor immigration attorney.
The bottom line is that certainly as recently as 20 years, I remember the George Bush fired the parliamentarian, or I should say that the Senate did at the time, the Republican-controlled Senate, fired the parliamentarian because the parliamentarian was ruling in a way they didn't like. And it's not really even a ruling. It is an advisory opinion. There is no constitutional authority that the parliamentarian has. The parliamentarian serves at the will of the president of the Senate, which in this instance is Kamala Harris, and they can be fired. They have been fired for having a different perspective on what is allowed than the party deems fit. This is a choice. This is a choice.
We could just get rid of the parliamentarian entirely, couldn't we? And just have this be a responsibility of, say, Kamala Harris right now.
Or a responsibility of the 100 elected senators to make a determination independent of a parliamentarian.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, we don't need more institutional obstacles to direct democracy in the Senate, but that's what that serves.
You could just have it be an aide. Like, I mean, someone, who can give an opinion on it, but it doesn't, it is, I don't even know what function it serves to have a parliamentarian at this point.
I just said it.
Yeah, I guess that's it. And so, but the bottom line is that parliamentarian can be fired. That parliamentarian can be overruled. I mean, the reason why they fire the parliamentarian is because they don't want the political cudgel of a ruling to be out there, which, of course, I think is an archaic vision of politics in this country. Yeah. Right? I mean, honestly, like, there was a time where the parties were much more aligned, and I'm thinking like the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, where there was a tremendous amount of bipartisanship, where the idea of norms were elevated because there was really no dramatic discrepancy in the policy choices of the different parties. I mean, we've had people on this program who've written books on this, that there were complaints at the time that there wasn't really sufficient choice between the two parties, which is also, rather stunning when you look at how much corporate money has now sort of overtaken both parties. That is a phenomena that is really an innovation that took place in the late 80s as far as the Democrats. But the idea that the voting public cares about the parliamentarian versus immigration reform, the idea that the voting public cares about the parliamentarian versus, say, $15 minimum wage, is absurd.
Maybe we should just tell the Democrats that the parliamentarian's job has become obsolete due to automation, and now they can get rid of her.
There you go.
Get rid of the position altogether. That seems to be an argument that appeals to them.
But like the Title 42 thing, this is because they're basically caving to Stephen Miller.
That's, I think, ultimately what it is. They don't want the narrative of, they're willing to do immigration reform unless it sticks out too much. And their fear, just like these deportation and the Title 42, their fear is that they're going to draw too much attention to this question of immigration. And I don't know that they have polling to back this up. It seems to me to be the bottom line is, if you are keeping 40% of children off of poverty. It is necessary but insufficient, which that earned income tax credit has been doing, or I should say the child tax credit has been doing, among other programs. If you are providing material benefit to people, it is going to far outweigh the agitation by people who are already voting against you, the xenophobes in the Republican Party. I mean, they have been activated. They are not going away, but they're also not. You're not going to create more of them. This is how. This is a mainstay of them, and the idea. Despite how often, Laura Ingraham gets on and says it. I think we even have a clip of Laura Ingraham talking about this in terms of the Afghan, the refugees. It's not going to make a difference. They're there already. They don't care. Here is, and this is the only thing to add to this whole question of reconciliation at this point. Here is West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin. He's with CNN's Manu Raju. And Manchin had been talking about trying to delay the reconciliation bill to 2022. Now, the Republicans are already planning to spend millions of dollars attacking the Democrats for tax hikes. They probably won't mention on people who are making more than $400,000 a year, but that's their plan to run against the Democrats in 2022. The idea that you would push this reconciliation bill into 2022 is essentially saying it's one of those, tell me that you want to kill this bill without telling me that you want to kill this bill. And, but
they don't want to have that conversation in the election year.
Here is Manchin maybe stepping off that just a little bit.
He would never.
And if there's not enough clarity, then you need to get clarity, and people need to know what tax reforms and where we stand nationwide and where the inflation is, all the things I've talked about.
So. It's not to wait till next year, right?
No, I didn't. You know what I said? I said, let's wait and see whatever we need. We'll know, have a good idea. The main thing is inflation. If it's transitory or not, you have a better idea, once we get into it a little bit longer. But right now, inflation's still high, and now we understand that natural gas prices are higher than they've ever been in West Virginia, too. And the people that end up paying the highest is the ones that can't afford it. Mm-hmm. So we got to worry about all these things.
Yes, and by the way, just an aside, I made $500,000 as a part of my holdings in a coal company, and so I have no opinions on the matter in just 1 year.
It's interesting to just note that he didn't say, well, no, I didn't say next year. I just said, wait and see. Now, wait and see could be 7 months.
He does this all the
or
time.
It could be 2 weeks.
He floats something out to the media, and he knows that they'll pick it up. And if he doesn't get the response he wants, or if leadership talks to him later behind the scenes, he backs off of it.
I think the whole sort of push that inflation is not transitory seems to have died down. Like, you just don't see the reports because everybody's starting to see that, at least some of the prices have peaked. The bottom line is that there are supply chain problems. It's not that we don't have the capacity to produce what people want. It is that we do not have the supply chains. They have been disrupted temporarily because we've had this thing called a pandemic. We sent shipping containers all around the globe off of the beaten trade paths, if you will. And so you've got shipping containers that in normal times would add $2,000, $2,500 to the cost of whatever was in the shipping container. And now they're adding 10 times that because the shipping container is not in the place where it normally is. That is not inflation that is caused by demand outstripping the capacity of our economy to supply. It is we have temporary logistical problems. And he knows this at that point, but maybe he's waiting for that to shake out.
It's transitory. We just don't know the answers to all these questions yet.
It's impossible to know.
It's just a useful tool for him to point to this like phenomenon that's going to die down in a few months to push a greater austerity and stuff. And I just want to point out too, because I know that, you know, it fascinates me endlessly how the media chooses to say, like, you know, a bill that has spending that spreads out over 10 years is 3.5 trillion or whatever. Like, that kind of framework helps his argument that it's going to create some sort of inflation. It's something like 350 billion in spending in the first year. That's something that's very different than what he's trying to assert there. And I think that needs to be pointed out a bit more.
All right, we got to take a quick break. Come back, wrap things up. Okay, so now we're getting reports about what's going on the Hill right now from CNN congressional correspondent Ryan Nobles. This is about a little less than an hour ago. The Democratic passage of the continuing resolution debt ceiling in the House, a group of progressives have told leadership they will not vote for this bill if it includes $1 billion funding for Israel's Iron Dome. And now the Rules Committee has gone into recess. Meanwhile, in the Senate, John Thune, Republican from the great super spreader state of South Dakota, says no chance there will be 10 Republicans to vote to break a filibuster on the continuing resolution with the debt limit hike. And again, this continuing resolution is needed to avoid a shutdown past September 30th. I mean, I don't want to harp on this, but the idea of what the Democrats did when the Republicans were in this situation in 2017 versus what it was so obvious. And of course, you know, a lot of the reporting doesn't make it clear that this is not a passive thing by the Republicans. They are filibustering. It is an active blocking of this continuing resolution. But we will have more to say on this tomorrow, I imagine. For those of you who are watching us on Peacock, we say goodbye.
Goodbye.
And for those of you who are not watching us on Peacock, which is, frankly, the vast majority of you, we say hello and we continue talking about this. Here is Chuck Schumer, being about as feckless as you can be, pretending this is kabuki. This is kabuki. Trent Lott fired the parliamentarian for George Bush. I think it was back in 2003, 2001, to get the Bush tax cuts. Is that what it was? Here's Chuck Schumer pretending that the parliamentarian is like a wizard.
Now, I just want to say something about the news we received last night about the Senate parliamentarian. Last night's ruling was extremely disappointing. It saddened me, it frustrated me, it angered me. But make no mistake, the fight continues. Senate Democrats have prepared alternative proposals and will be holding additional meetings with the Senate parliamentarian in the coming days. I've been working closely with my colleagues in the Senate, including Judiciary Chairman Durbin, Senators Padilla, Menendez, Lujan, Cortez Masto, and we will continue our fight to find the best option available to provide immigrants with the chance at one day obtaining lawful residence here in America. The last year and a half, Madam President, have shown how vital our immigrants have been to keeping our economy going during a time of crisis. So many risk their lives on the front line of this pandemic, but remain excluded from the very same benefits that have kept millions of others secure during these hard times. We're short of workers from one end of America to the other. One of the reasons, the Trump administration dramatically cut back on immigrants in this country. We need them. We need them in our labor force. We need them to continue American vitality. We need them because they're part of the American dream. It's estimated in my city by some that 1/3 of the healthcare workers at the height of COVID who risked their lives for us were immigrants. Having a strong law that helps our immigrants is vital. The American people understand that fixing our broken immigration system is a moral imperative and an economic imperative.
Does the parliamentarian...
Immigration reform has been one of the most important causes of my time in the Senate, and I will not stop fighting.
Oh, really? That's a funny way of showing it.
Good Lord.
Secretly, he's super happy.
I mean,
he's happy that they don't have to talk about immigration. That's the real.
I don't know if he. I mean, I don't know. You maybe, but this is just a joke. This is just a joke. The parliamentarian is like, I mean, contemplate this for a moment.
You're a wizard, parliamentarian.
The Senate is. Let's just talk about how undemocratic, small d, the Senate is. The vote of someone, with all due respect, Matt, in North Dakota is worth like what? 15 times more than the vote of someone in New York State in terms of the Senate. At least there are 40 million people more represented by the Democrats in the Senate than the Republicans. 40 million. Over 10% of the country. That's just at a 50-50, right? But then you need 60 votes to pass something, except for this one narrow thing, reconciliation. And then all of a sudden you need this wizard who sits in the corner and their
looks
authority.
Over her orb. Oh,
honestly,
can immigration be included in the budgetary resolution?
I thought I beat the final boss, and there's another new little boss out here I wasn't prepared for at all.
Exactly. And where does their authority derive from?
The boss I just defeated.
Robert's Rules of Order. I mean, this is like, it's like, it's like some type of, like, I don't know, like a social club or something. Excuse me, I'm the parliamentarian. No, they're not. They're not elected. They're chosen. They're fired. They're ignored. They're advisors. They're advisors.
But that's my point, though, is that they, Chuck Schumer's a bit relieved, I think, in the midst of a fight over infrastructure to not have to deal with this. That's what they don't want to deal with it. They're so behind the times and they're thinking about immigration. They see it as like the way the Beltway media sees it, right? When ABC sent down a panel to sit in front of the border to Mexico to talk about how horrible things were. Like, they have anxiety about that narrative. And so they're happy to push this off and not have to deal with it. And then, you know what? If Democrats lose one chamber, which is very likely going into 2022, done. Nothing on immigration going forward. And they're fine with that, honestly.
It's just too bad that there isn't like some type of huge, like a stone or rock in the middle of the Senate floor that someone could run over and pull a sword out of to defeat the wizard that sits in the corner and says what you can and cannot vote on.
Kamala Harris needs to get Excalibur.
All right, we're going to take a break, head into the fun half. Just a reminder, folks, it's your support that makes this show possible. You can have this show survive and thrive by becoming a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, you not only support the free show, you also get the fun half every day. Don't forget, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code MAJORITY, get 10% off. Visit our friends over at Sunset Lake Sabadell. All you got to do is Google Sunset Lake Sabadell and Majority Report and find out what the coupon codes are.
Gets more insane by the day.
I know it. And if you want the AM Quickie newsletter, go to majority.fm. Scroll down to the bottom, put your email address in there. We will send it to you every morning free of charge. We'll never sell your email address. Check out the Discord, Majority Discord. You get the app if you want to IM us during the show, Majority app, or listen to the show or watch the show. You can do all that through the app. Nomi is not joining us today. She's got... she's moving, but you can check out her show at youtube.com/The Nomiki Show. A bunch of people sent stuff yesterday. It's what I was practicing. YouTube.com.
You're practicing in the mirror. We heard you.
/The Nomiki Show. And, Nomiki Show.
No, you were right.
No, I think it's the Nomiki Show.
Nomiki
Show. No, it's like a Motlek. What is happening in the Motlekian media universe?
Mott is actually a town in North Dakota that I was obsessed with because it was one letter away from my name.
Really?
Yeah.
When did that obsession end? Like in your late 20s?
It's ongoing.
Probably about 4th grade.
Hey, Ma, is it still Mott? It's
Mott,
like one letter away from me.
Never went there. It was just
Matt,
like a little
come
farming
on.
town.
You're in your 20s now, sweetheart. Please.
Anyways, patreon.com/Left Reckoning. We talked with Victor Poggi about Brazil, followed up the Lula sort of push attempt. Coming up on Wednesday, we talked to David Gerard, who's one of my favorite no-coiners, anti-Bitcoin guy. We go in depth about not only why cryptocurrency is silly, but also why blockchain and smart contracts are also a hokum designed for marketing to sell this sort of technology to venture capitalists, basically.
Interesting.
And there won't be any sort of internet level advancement that comes out of this technology. It's just a way to make money. Because people always say that. They say, well, Bitcoin is bad, but blockchain and no, not so much. So we talked with David Gerard about that. Wednesday, go subscribe to the YouTube channel to watch that interview.
All right, folks. See you in the fun half. 646-257-3920. Left is best. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
You know, I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous. You're a little bit upset. You're riled up.
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude. You want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
Some good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457. 2, 38, 56, 27. 1/2. 5 8s. 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy.
Dance.
Ooh.
Rand Paul. I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're nothing.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Andy. You guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
That guy might be a Nazi.
Agree.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way! Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook.
Throw our hands up.
Ooh. Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me,
Hey! Shut up!
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
we are back. It is the fun half, ladies and gentlemen. The number 646-257-3920 if you want to be a part of the program. Let's go to those very same phones. Calling from a 256 area code. You are in the pole position today. Who's this? Where are you calling from? Wait a second. Am I in? I'm not even in. Hold on for 1 second. Yes, 256. You're in the pole position. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Good afternoon. This is Jacob from Alabama.
Jacob, how are you? We were just talking about the striking miners down there.
Yeah, that's why I called. I figured, you talked about that. There were three things that I wanted to plug, and then I'll just jump off that other people have done that I've really thought were valuable. And I've enjoyed listening to the show live. I'm down in New Orleans with the recovery efforts for Ida, and so I'm listening live in the truck, and I normally don't get to listen live, so that's a lot of fun.
Oh, great.
But the first two things are kind of, I'm a big union guy. I think unions are really important and really valuable. But they're human institutions, and, as such, they have flaws and flawed iterations. And there were a couple stories pretty recently that showed that and showed the importance of, fighting within your union to maintain a sort of democracy and transparency and fight. One of them was a podcast on working people by Maximilian Alvarez. He interviewed the family of Evan Seyfried, who committed suicide after being bullied by management up to regional managers at Kroger for standing up for his coworkers who were being sexually harassed. He was blackmailed, and ultimately it got so bad that he did end up committing suicide. And the union there, the steward, did not do anything for him. Apparently he made multiple requests to the steward for help and representation, and the steward didn't do anything. And lo and behold, subsequent to him quitting his job and then committing suicide, the steward got a promotion. And so, it's just an incredibly sad story. I'd recommend people listen to that. Luis Feliz Leon from Labor Notes has a really good story from about the carpenters' strike in the Northwest. There's some controversy there around project labor agreements and a strike, and some of the carpenters there, even though there's a strike, are being made by the union to cross the picket line, and they're being threatened with fines and even legal action. Like, the union is threatening to sue them if they quote unquote follow the directives of quote unquote unauthorized persons. There is a kind of rank and file reform group. They're calling themselves the Peter J. McGuire Group, after the founder of the Carpenters Union. And it's just really some of the worst examples of unions fighting against and not helping their workers, not helping their members, and it's really, just really, really unfortunate. And so, I think those are good things for people to look at and kind of remember that, oh yeah, unions are run by people too, and you need to make sure that that they don't mess it that they don't mess what we've got up.
Right. Well, Jacob, I appreciate your calling in with that, and know you've been very supportive of those miners with your radio show, and good for you for helping out with IDA.
Oh yeah, I've enjoyed it, and being down here has really given me a real sense of empathy with the folks who went on strike at Nabisco and Frito-Lay and the folks who are still on strike with the mine workers, because I'm down here, I'm working 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, and it sucks. It's working that much is not fun. And look, I signed up for this. I volunteered for it. It's short term. Like, I'm fine. It's all good, and I'm getting paid well, right? So it's not an issue there. But I was thinking about, like, oh my God, what if this was my life? Like, what if I had to do this every day, and like I couldn't see my family, I couldn't, go to ball games or have a social life. Like, I just couldn't imagine, this being my life. And it makes me so thankful for, the union that I have, the job that I have, and like really strengthens my sense of appreciation for the struggle that they've got going on there. And the third thing that I wanted to mention was that they've got the UMWA down there. They've got a registry for a toy drive for Christmas. They're expecting the strike now to actually go through Christmas. And so I was at a rally there, and the international president was like, we don't want our kids to have a worse Christmas than the Scabs kids, And so Hayden Wright is on Twitter, and she's got the link to the registry. You can follow her. She's the president of the auxiliary down there, doing so much good work. And you can find the link to the toy drive on her Twitter page. Hayden Wright, HAEDENWRIGHT.
Thank you, Jacob. Talk to you soon. Appreciate the call.
Thanks, Jacob.
Yep. Bye.
Bye. Let's take one. Should we take one more call and then get into it a little bit?
Sure.
Let's see what we got here. Who's next? Calling for a 405 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, it's Gregory from Oklahoma.
Gregory from Oklahoma. Long time no hear from.
Been about 2 months or so. Yeah.
How's
the? Right. How are you guys?
Doing well. How's your campaign going?
It's going all right. That's exactly what I wanted to talk to you guys about today. So fundraising has been going okay. Next month, I'm planning on doing a campaign kickoff, official campaign kickoff. I've been kind of just busy with that, as well as substitute teaching. Also working on getting a website put together, that kind of a thing. I wanted to also tell you a little bit about the guy that I am running against.
Okay, remind everybody what you're running for.
I am running for state representative in the Oklahoma House of Representatives in District 26.
Okay, District 26.
Yeah, but yeah, the guy I'm running against, his name is Del Curbs.
Did you say Bell Curve?
Right.
Del Curbs. Del Curbs. DELL. Del Curbs.
Del Curbs. All right.
Yes, and he is in the middle of his third term. And a few years ago,
I thought it was like a Bell Hooks thing, the feminist writer.
No. Yeah, I know who you're talking about. But yeah, a few years ago, in 2018, summer of 2018, I had an interaction with him at Starbucks where I was asking him a question about the ballot initiative that was going to be on the ballot that month. It was 788, the medical marijuana initiative. I asked him what his position was on it. He wouldn't give me a position. But before he gave me his nothingness of an answer, he told me that he didn't like the way that I talked about him on social media. He said that it made it hard for him to be able to talk to me about things that go on at the Capitol. And I thought it was kind of funny, a little weird.
Your reputation preceded you.
Yeah, and this is when I was like 20 years old. Like I wasn't this was before I had a YouTube show, all that, before I even had like 1,000 followers on Twitter. He had just known that I had been posting about him on Facebook. I don't know exactly how he knew, because he's not friends with me on Facebook, and most of my posts about him were private, so he would have had to have known from someone else. So I don't know if he just had someone spying on me or whatever it was. I don't know. But since that interaction, he's never really looked me in the eye ever since, or we've never really talked ever since, except for saying hi. But yeah, so I just wanted to let people know the type of person I'm running against. He's a little bit of a coward.
Now, Gregory, do you have a website where people can help you out, or what?
I do not have a campaign website yet, but I do have a donation link for my Act Blue. It is on my account. It's attached to the pinned tweet on my Twitter account, and I've tweeted it out a number of times.
All right, Gregory, let me give you a piece of advice.
Yes.
Do you have a URL yet for your campaign?
I do, yes.
Okay, you can go in to your server and have that forward to your Act Blue page until you have a website, so that you could say, Sam, the place where people can donate is Gregory from Oklahoma, 26th, or Defeat Dell, or,
right.
Whatever your website is, and then we could tell people to go there.
Okay.
People underuse the forwarding website URL technique, and I think that's a big mistake.
Okay. I wasn't even aware of that. I'm not really good with technology.
Yeah, well, wherever you've got that URL registered, you go in and you can just forward it to your Act Blue thing. So you just go and you copy your URL for your Act Blue, you just paste it in, and within an hour, that website will redirect there, and then you can just switch it when you get your website up.
Okay.
All right, man. Okay. Well, good luck. This Dell guy sounds like a creep. I appreciate the call. All right, man.
That is very funny to see a kid at Starbucks and be like, I don't like the way you've been posting about me on Facebook.
I know, right?
I mean, that's constituent services. Here's Joe Biden delivering remarks to the United Nations General Assembly in New York City. Gridlock alert in New York City right now. Here is Joe Biden. This is clip number 1.
Stay away from the east side of Manhattan today.
I stand here today for the first time in 20 years with the United States not at war. We've turned the page. All the unmatched strength, energy, and commitment, will, and resources of our nation are now fully and squarely focused on what's ahead of us, not what was behind. I know this. As we look ahead, we will lead. We will lead on all the greatest challenges of our time, from COVID to climate, peace and security, human dignity and human rights, but we will not go it alone. We will lead together with our allies and partners and in cooperation with all those who believe, as we do, that this is within our power to meet these challenges, to build a future that lifts all of our people and preserves this planet. But none of this is inevitable. It's a choice. And I can tell you where America stands. We will choose to build a better future. We, you and I, we have the will and capacity to make it better. Ladies and gentlemen, we cannot afford to waste any more time. Let's get to work. Let's make our better future now. We can do this. It's within our power and capacity. Thank you. God bless you all.
I'm struck by a couple of things on this. First off, really tough to push the human dignity and human rights as you are literally expelling thousands of Haitians who have gone through just enormous hardship, which was basically like the whipped cream on top of just an enormous hardship.
It's humane to kind of provide cover for the border agents using their reins as whips on Haitians.
The concept of choice, like every time I hear that in that context, I'm just thinking like, why are you letting your parliamentarian prevent you from doing, let's say this work on maybe on climate change and or immigration reform, et cetera, et cetera. The other thing that strikes me is, our definition of war. I guess what we're involved in terms of like other drone programs and, wherever it is, Somalia or Yemen or wherever we're doing this, wherever our JSOC teams are, is just kinetic energy. But here's the overall thing is that, I mean, nice speech, nice sentiments. If I was the leader of another country or a citizen of another country, and Joe Biden came up there and said, like, you can trust us again, I'd be like, are you out of your effing mind?
Prove it. Repeal the AUMF.
Well, repeal the AUMF. Do this other stuff. But, frankly, if I was sitting in one of those seats, I would have been like, 10 years ago, dude, I was here with watching Barack Obama give this speech. And 2 years later, Donald Trump is your president. Your country is effed. That's basically what I would be like. You are not a stable democracy.
Well, no one can trust the United States' position on the global stage for a variety of reasons, and one of them being the Iran deal.
Where's the Iran deal?
Right. We strike deals and then we have an unstable maniac come in and rip them up. Like, why would anybody want to participate in talks with the United States?
I'd be nervous. Well, I could participate in talks, but I'd be a little bit nervous thinking like, we've already seen how this thing goes.
I think the rest of the world is like, let the big bully tire themselves out. They're on the decline anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it is.
I just think that we present as and I think it's an accurate presentation of a rather unstable country.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we just had 2,000 people storm the Capitol 10 months ago. And it may have been just boomers or whatever, that, but like, I mean, that's not like on the list of like the top 10 things that show a stable democracy. That wouldn't be on it.
And again, we gave Biden a ton of credit for withdrawing from Afghanistan, and I still believe that was the right decision, and
without a doubt,
he did the right thing 100%, and he deserves, yes, again, credit for it. But then, don't make broad statements about human dignity when at the same time you're publicly saying that, I oppose the vaccine patent waiver and behind the scenes not doing so, and you're making excuses for the abuse of migrants or asylum seekers at the border. You can't have it both ways.
We kind of touched on this, but did you see that the 6-point plan advanced by Trump lawyer John Eastman for VP Pence to overturn the election was released?
Yeah.
Pretty interesting reading.
Yeah, it doesn't look like, and you made the point on Twitter, Matt, that this was not a question of like, are you kidding me? I would never, plot to overthrow the outcome of an election. No, it was more just like, what's the risk reward here? I mean, can we get away with this?
We already got quite a good haul from Trump. Maybe we should make a getaway.
And let's be clear here. This 6-point plan, they didn't throw this away. Somebody has kept it in their files. Point one, Pence could preside over the joint session and begins to open and count the ballots, starting with Alabama and going through the states alphabetically if required. When he gets to Arizona, he announces that he has multiple slates of electors and is so going to defer decision on that until finishing the other states. This would be the first break with the procedure set out in the act. This is Trump's lawyer, incidentally.
It's interesting that those sorts of lines are very interesting, like letting you know exactly where you're crossing the lines.
Exactly. At the end, he announces that because of the ongoing disputes in the 7 states, there are no electors that can be deemed validly appointed to those states. That means the total numbers of elected electors appointed, the language of the 12th Amendment, is 454. This reading of the 12th Amendment has also been advanced by Harvard law professor Lawrence Tribe. Majority of the electors appointed would therefore be 228. At this point, 232 votes for Trump, 222 votes for Biden. Pence then gavels Trump as reelected. And then what's amazing about this is
Trump is reelected.
Yeah, well, but what's amazing about this this 6-point plan is it like this isn't a sort of an ins and outs of the law. This is like it's almost like this is a vignette or like a little play. Yeah. Point number 4, howls, of course, from the Democrats. That's a quote. Who now claim, contrary to Tribe's prior position, that 270 is required. So Pence says, fine. I mean, this is really an amazing document.
It's a wonderful script.
Pursuant to the 12th Amendment, no candidate has achieved the necessary majority. That sends the matter to the House. So in other words, it's a head fake. He's saying we're going to do a head fake, and then you're going to, the way that you're going to maintain some vision of being reasonable, yeah, pull up the memo, Bradley, is that sends the matter to the House, where the vote shall be taken by the states. The representation from each state having 1 vote. Republicans currently control 26 of the state delegations. The bare majority needed to win that vote. President Trump is reelected there as well. And then one last piece. This is number 5. Assuming the electoral count process is followed, and upon getting the objections to the Arizona states, the 2 houses break into their separate chambers. We should not allow the Electoral Count Act constraint on debate to control. That would mean that a prior legislature was determining the rules of the present one. A constitutional no-no, as Tribe has forcefully argued, so someone, Ted Cruz, Rand Paul, etc., in other words, the lunatics, should demand normal rules, which includes the filibuster. That creates a stalemate that would give the state legislatures more time to weigh in to formally support the alternate slate of electors if they had not already done so. So in other words, they were going to freeze the process, throw it back to the states, which were controlled by Republicans. The main thing here is that Pence should do this without asking permission, either from a vote of the joint session or from the court. Let the other side challenge his actions in court, where Tribe, who in 2001 conceded the president of the Senate, might be in charge of counting the votes. And others who would press a lawsuit would have their past position that these are justiciable questions, political questions, thrown back at them to get the lawsuit dismissed. This fact is the Constitution assigns its power to the vice president. We should take all our actions with this in mind. This is just a game plan on how to steal an election. This is not a legal memo making an argument as to any of it. This is just a political document.
It was the dress rehearsal where, Pence says this. Pence says fine. Pence moves to his spot on center stage right.
Exactly.
It's very, very coordinated.
Cut to
January 6th was basically Trump realizing that the Republicans weren't going to run this play for him and getting his people upset because that wasn't going to happen and trying to force their hand on basically running this play.
Yep.
I'm anti-carceral, but I would lock up John Eastman.
Yeah,
no kidding. I mean,
and we just got to stress, like, this is the leader of the Fed Society, the Claremont Institute, clerked under Clarence Thomas. This guy is he's not some fringe wacko writing like opinions for Breitbart. This guy is in the mix.
And don't for a moment think that this will not be referenced in the next election.
It's probably going to be referenced in the Brazilian elections.
Sam sent it a tushy hole. Can folks still get some assistance with membership to listen to the Fun Half through the app? My friend has been bummed about missing out, but can't afford it. Left is best. Yes. Send an email to majorityreporters@gmail.com. You got to wait, and we sometimes miss emails, so don't be afraid to bump it, and we will hook you up. We'll work out something with you. Josh from Tucson. Just a reminder: subscribe to the Majority Report, like the stream, or subscribe on Twitch. Yes, subscribe on Twitch, poggers. I gotta get like that hook, like what's that guy's name again? Beta. Who's that guy?
Jesse Lee Peterson.
Yeah. Fletch Nasty. Imagine how embarrassing a government shutdown must be when you are the government, with the exception of the judiciary. Shake my head. Vaping Goldfish. An Arkansas convicted tax avoider sued the Texas doctor for the bounty. There were 2 lawsuits, and one was specifically to bring up the constitutional aspects of this. Wayne Kerr. Gets me every time. Former Raytheon VP and current Air Force Secretary Frank Kendall made it crystal clear that China is his main focus during a speech at the Air Force Association's Airspace and Cyber Conference. According to an Air Force press release, Kendall mentioned China 27 times and is remarked compared to a single mention of Russia. That sort of takes a little bit of the steam out of the people who are so worried about Russiagate, doesn't it? How many times are those folks mentioning the atomic clock these days? Remember this?
Not so much. They kind of suck that bone dry, so now it's on to force the vote.
It was the worst media hoax akin to the weapons of mass destruction, except for the implications of it.
Well, that's like Sagar calling the post office story during the 2020 election Russiagate 2.0, which I think really think about. Yeah.
It's just that I think that I'm going to eliminate from this equation the most important element of it.
Which is the consequences?
Yes.
And the facts?
Like the implications. Rains, not lanyards. City folk, laugh my ass off. Sorry, Rains. All right.
I was following your lead with lanyards. I thought
Oh.
that, I don't know. I thought that was a special term.
Michael Locksbig. Tennessee Department of Health is planning on restricting effective COVID treatments like monoclonal antibodies to the unvaccinated because they're at greater risk of dying from the virus. What next? Will Tennessee only treat victims of car crashes who are driving drunk without a seatbelt? Is that true? They're planning on restricting effective. They're only going to give monoclonal antibodies to the unvaccinated. I mean, they're at greater risk of dying from the virus.
Yeah. I mean, I trust medical professionals to make these sorts of triage decisions. Frankly.
Yeah. So I have a friend who has whose dad is a pediatric neurologist. Has a lot of friends from or former one. A lot of friends in St. Louis. Apparently, St. Louis, I think it's St. Louis University Hospital. I'm not sure exactly which hospital, or a children's hospital there. It's filled up from the Ozarks, and you don't hear much about it. We saw all the pictures of the Ozarks, but
what do you mean pictures of the Ozarks?
Well, you remember we saw all those pictures of the Ozarks, people partying.
Oh yes, like the vacation.
Yeah, you don't hear much
the
about
lake
the pediatric wings that are all filled up.
No, I feel like there's COVID fatigue in news coverage, and it's not good.
No,
because we need images and descriptions of what's happening there.
It's always snowy in Ottawa. The Canadian election should be canary to the U.S. midterms. Trudeau had solid poll numbers and COVID policy goodwill going into the election, had no actual impact on seat counts. Lost the popular vote. People hated that he called an election, and his answer for why he called it was about as good as Hillary's when asked why she wanted to be president. I mean, we don't have something analogous to that in terms of like calling the election, I think was in and of itself, something that may have damaged him. Like,
yeah, that's a different
sort of a naked political stunt on some level.
Yeah, it was an opportunistic gamble that wasted everybody's time.
Yeah. COVID respondent supports for people will determine everything. If Biden and the Dems use negative partisanship but have no gains made to defend as being under attack from Team Trump, they will lose big. I'm sorry, I just don't agree. I definitely think the Democrats need to pass the reconciliation. I definitely think the failure to pass anything will be extremely bad for Biden.
Yes.
There's no doubt about it. But I do not think, let me put it this way. If you gave me the choice from an electoral standpoint, from just purely electoral standpoint, I could be wrong. I'm not talking from a policy standpoint. If I could only have one or the other, from an electoral standpoint, between the providing of material benefit through the reconciliation package, or, Donald Trump out engaging in every one of these congressional races and touting, let's say, the Texas abortion law.
Oh, that's easy.
I think from an electoral standpoint, and I don't particularly like it, I think the second one is going to do better. But from a policy standpoint, I would rather pass these things, get them in there, and then if you got to lose the House, you lose the House. I mean, it is what it is. But, that's not the way any of this works. Like Joe Manchin's, Joe Manchin doesn't care.
Right.
And the thing is, no one will vote for more Dems if the parliamentarian remains lauded as the fourth branch of government. I just think that, like,
we care about the parliamentarian. Most people don't, or follow it.
They don't know it.
Yeah.
They don't know it. I mean, this is the thing that is so frustrating. There's no Democratic voters out there going like, I was going to vote for the Democrats, but they empowered the parliamentarian too much. No. They're not. It's just not that is, any politician who made that calculation would be ridiculous. The problem is that you're just not getting stuff done. And it should be known that it's a choice and that it's really just a function of like the activists. Like people sometimes conflate these things and, like the same reason why no one would give a crap that they overruled the parliamentarian or they fired the parliamentarian is also the same reason why no one gives a crap that they're lauding the parliamentarian as the fourth branch of government. Voters at large don't know any of what we're talking about. Kinnick, hey Sam, have you looked deeply into the solar tax credit ad you ran today? I watched an interesting piece that John Oliver did on his show, and they found that these programs can be extremely harmful to homeowners. These upgrades pay for themselves taglines are not always true in areas that have relatively cheap energy costs. Well, that's what's good about, I think, what Danny is doing is that he's running through these numbers. Furthermore, some companies recommend people leverage their home against these upgrades, resulting in foreclosure. I don't think they should do that. I haven't done research past the segment, but I know you don't like promoting products that can be potentially harmful. Left is best. No, I appreciate that. I feel pretty confident that this consulting is a way to avoid that type of thing. The Ligma variant.
Right.
Shoot. Yeah. I talked with my far right-wing stepdad a couple of months ago for the first time in about 8 years. He's vaccinated and believes the COVID is a problem, but repeats the same BS right-wing talking points about personal responsibility and government overreach. He's questioning why planes required vaccinated people to wear masks. My mom and I both explained to him it's just a matter of convenience, so they didn't have to check vaccination status and memorize who was and wasn't on the plane. Yes, why we can't just use the honor system? My mom and I just laughed in his face. I haven't talked to him about this since. I mean, I would say it's not just convenience. It is harder to transmit and catch if you are vaccinated. But what you've got to do is weigh the opportunity cost associated with wearing a mask, even if it's like, you take it off to eat, okay, you still.
Also, these airlines don't want to be held liable. Sorry. Talk about free market, right? They don't want to be held liable for if you catch COVID on the plane or whatever. Although I guess there's the liability shields, but that doesn't apply federally, right?
I don't know about the liability on the airlines, but I think ultimately it's just like, it's so easy.
It's so easy, and it's in their interests to slow the spread of COVID on their airplanes, basically.
All right, let's take a call. You call from an 857 area code. Welcome to the POG half of the Majority Report.
Hello?
Hello?
Oh my God, wow. I've been trying to get into this call for like 2 months.
Well, poggers, man.
Okay. So first question is,
say what?
Have you heard of
Whoa. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Oh, okay. Sorry. I'm Joseph, and I'm calling from Massachusetts.
Where in Massachusetts, dude?
Peabody.
Peabody. Sweet. All right, go ahead.
Sounds like Saturday.
My first question is, have you heard of the Logan Paul having some beef with Candace Owens?
Logan Paul?
He has no idea who Logan Paul is.
He's a YouTuber.
He's a really douchey person.
Really, really popular YouTuber.
Yeah.
Don't know. I'm unaware.
And he boxes with professionals.
Yeah, he boxes, and he had some controversy between him and Candace Owens.
What was the nature of that controversy?
I'm not sure how it started, but I guess it was something about them wanting to debate. And the reason why I was wondering, because I know you and H3H3 did that thing against Steven Crowder.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you were ever going to reach out to him and try and debate Candace Owens.
Well, it's kind of a similar thing, right? Like, why does she want to debate Logan Paul as opposed to a political commentator?
I was wondering.
He's way dumb. I mean, Ethan's a great guy. He's like, Logan Paul is a douchebag idiot.
I mean, I don't know that. Would I debate Candace Owens? I mean,
debate Candace Owens?
No, my point is just that she wants somebody who she who she knows that she could have a really good shot against.
Will also get a lot of attention to monetize.
Yeah. I mean,
Sam doesn't quite bring the, I don't know what Logan Paul's subs are, but our 1.1 is not quite that.
I mean, I am happy to debate or talk to anyone
23.2 million
at, at any time. On this show, on their show. Yes. Logan Paul has not been in touch. I will say that.
Do you remember that suicide forest story? That's not the right term. Is it right? I don't know.
It's complicated. It was just a big event. It was a very terrible event.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Anyway, I appreciate you calling, and I didn't realize. If you're a fan, I'm sorry for besmirching him over and over again.
No, I'm not a fan. I'm just like, I don't know how to bring that up, because
smoking that sure loud says Logan Paul debating Candace Owens about whether or not it's okay to say the N-word over in 2 minutes when they both agree it's fine. Appreciate the call, man. Thanks for calling in. Okay.
Basically, he went to a Japanese forest where someone had
that's known for people committing suicide and did a YouTube video from there.
Yeah, and he was wearing like a Yoda hat or something like that. Like, oh, dude, look at this body hanging.
They came across a body that was
Jesus.
Yeah, it was pretty gross.
Yeah,
and he got a lot of follows from that. He's already popular before that. But.
This is really interesting. BQ resident, why aren't the Dems or anyone talking about the $300 million a day we are not spending in Afghanistan? Seems a good way to talk about the price we're paying for the reconciliation package. I suspect that that money, from an accounting standpoint, is not perceived as part of the budget. Because if it was, we would.
That's for the separate.
I'm not sure.
fund.
I'm not sure. It's a good point, though.
It's
there
at least
should
good
be.
for
They
branding.
could have pushed some type of like.
Yeah.
You know, Afghan war dividend or something.
That's a good. That's a. I might. Yeah.
All right, this is really fascinating, and I want to. I've gone back and forth on this because I want to give credit where credit is due. But I also can't help but think that in the course of this, it also illustrates certain points. And I think that maybe it reveals a certain lack of perspective.
We could do two things at once.
I'm going to try and do these two things at once.
It's we.
What's
I'm
that?
joking.
Oh, I'm sorry. We can. I mean, I have a particular bone to pick.
Yes, that's understood.
But it is very odd for me to be find myself more aligned with Sam Harris's perspective on a item in the news of the day than let's say like Glenn Greenwald. And I think that's a fair assessment based upon what Harris says here. Sam Harris was asked a question on one of his Ask Me Anything things, one of his funnel shows. The question was, what's going on with Brett, what is his name? Brett Weinstein?
Weinstein.
Brett Weinstein and Heather, what's her last name? Hein, who I think are married and have a podcast together. And they have been devoting a significant amount of time to vaccine skepticism and ivermectin promotion. Here is part of Sam Harris's response when he gets this question.
My name is Corey. I live in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. My question for you is more of a vote than a question. I'd really love to hear you discuss the Eric Topol podcast with Brett Weinstein on a future podcast. I know that you have considered that and kind of ruled it out at this point, but love for you to reconsider. My sense is that there is a lot more common ground to land on than disagreement, and each of you, I think, could actually learn from the other about their own sense of reality surrounding the COVID issues.
Pause it for one second. I also just like to cultivate this kind of audience too. Wow.
I know, right? But it's like it gives a language to feel thoughtful while having zero substantive thoughts whatsoever. But
you can both learn from each other. One who denies the efficacy of science, and the one who does. I mean, go ahead.
And we would all learn from the two of you learning from each other. Thank you.
Hey, Corey. Thanks for the question. Yeah, this is a hard one for me, actually. I get that it seems crazy not to just flip on the microphone and talk to the guy, or talk to him and Heather, who's also been his partner in crime. It's hard to put this in a way that doesn't sound like a personal attack, but the reason why I don't want to do a podcast with Brett and Heather is the same as why I wouldn't do a podcast with a 9/11 truth conspiracy theorist or Alex Jones or anyone in that world.
Charles Murray.
Because there's a basic asymmetry which is very hard to overcome. It's so much easier to make a mess than to clean it up. It's so much easier to light several small fires than to put them out. It's like a 10-to-1 advantage. To put it that way, it sounds like my concern is not losing a debate, and that's absolutely not my concern. If you're going to view this as a debate, it's won almost immediately. But I worry about what people take from the encounter, and I just don't want to do additional harm to our public conversation about what is in fact an important public health concern and a growing political one. first, the asymmetry. The reason why there's such an asymmetry here is that it is just impossible to debunk most things in real time. And even if the point being made is in fact spurious, it won't seem spurious to 99% of an audience, right? So the person on the conspiracy theory side of things can say, well, what about the 14 CDC officials who resigned last week and wouldn't give reasons when asked? What do you make of that? Right now, there's probably nothing to be made of that, right? I didn't even hear about it. And the truth is, I just made that up. But when delivered in the context of a, quote, debate about these things with someone whose whole angle is there's conspiracy everywhere, it can seem like, oh, you didn't know about that. Well, that's clearly a problem. You should look into that. What about the paper that just came out of Micronesia that showed ivermectin was 100% effective? I didn't see that paper out of Micronesia. Oh, you didn't? Well, okay, you should really do your homework.
Pause it for one second. What I found fascinating about this was that this is exactly what Amanda Montell was talking about yesterday on the program, right? Those phrases, you should do your research. What did they call it? Like the conversation ender, or
cliched conversation stoppers.
Yeah, something like that. And the hallmark of these conspiracy theorists. I found that very interesting. But continue here, because where he's going here is really fascinating to me. He is. And he goes on and he says, you know, and he says, to his credit, like, I'm not even the person to go on that. We bring on an expert who has all of the information at their faculties, you know, at their points. But he goes on to say, and maybe he says it in here, and I don't want to jump that, where he says, like, there's certain things you don't say in public. Is that the part of it? At one point he says, and we'll play some more of this, but at one point he says, you know, it's one thing for you not to get the vaccine. It's a personal choice, and, you know, it is what it is. But it's another to go out there and ostensibly ruminate about this stuff. There's some things you do not say in public.
As a broadcaster.
As a broadcaster, whatever.
Somebody with influence.
And maybe I'm extrapolating, but you also don't say it in public because of context. Right? That public is not just in terms of how many people can hear it. It also is the circumstance of the public at that time. It's one thing to say 10 years from now, ivermectin, we should look into. Or 5 years ago to talk about ivermectin might be something that people would have, you know, obviously. But when you say it now, and you talk about it in the context of everything that's going on politically.
Now, like post-vaccine,
where ivermectin is not just ivermectin, it is the solution that is used is deployed to convince people that the vaccine is unnecessary. This all is important. Now, so I want you to listen to this last part, and I want you to just keep in mind what I've just said about context, because I am here not only to praise, but all right, so go. Do you want to go to 1955? Go to 1955.
No matter how reasonable and attentive to caveats they can seem, and I will grant you, they can seem incredibly reasonable. They do not seem like Alex Jones. And this is why what they're doing is so insidious. But the basic message, the basic implication of everything they say, and the apparent reason behind everything they're saying is the belief that these COVID vaccines are dangerous and you should be worried about them. You should be profoundly hesitant to take them. These are not normal vaccines. And in fact, the pushing of these vaccines on the public is colossally unethical. That is what they are messaging, right? They've said as much explicitly on their own podcast. I think Brett called it the greatest crime of the century or something insane like that. I should get the actual language. All right, hold on. Okay, now I've taken a few minutes and found the transcript of Brett's confabulation on this topic. He's talking about the absolute scandal of the suppression of the life-saving knowledge of ivermectin and the pushing of the vaccines on his own podcast where he's talking to a Dr. Corey. The podcast itself is titled The Crime of the Century. And they're going back and forth about how nefarious the machinations must be to have produced this policy. Dr. Corey says all the pipeline molecules, the stuff that's coming that they want to bring to market, are also there, right? And then Brett says, which have had a tremendous investment made in them. The thing I think we're almost certain to get wrong is that as outsiders, we have no idea what these conversations sound like on the inside. There's a temptation to imagine that people are somehow sitting around comfortable with the fact that their behavior is going to cause hundreds of thousands, possibly millions of deaths, that it may stick humanity with a relationship with a pathogen that it will not be able to shake because it will prevent us from taking the appropriate action until it's too late. We imagine that people are saying these things out loud, when I'm sure that there are some sociopaths in the system who are probably capable of having those discussions, but there aren't enough sociopaths to account for this behavior. There is some way that people who are doing a harm great enough, I've called it the crime of the century, and I realize the century is young, but this is going to be hard to top. It's going to be hard to top. There is some way that people who are engaged in something worthy of acclaim, like the crime of the century, are comfortable with what they are doing, or worse, are convinced it's the right thing, that somehow the greater good is being served. Okay, but here you have it in fairly crystalline form, the conspiratorial thinking, the outrageous claims about death and destruction due to these vaccines, and the suppression of ivermectin for purely mercenary reasons. The problem, of course, is that there's no reason to think this is true, right? There is no reason to think that ivermectin is a surrogate for getting vaccinated. And there's no reason to think that people should be terrified of getting these vaccines. And that is the message that Brett is spreading hour by hour by hour. Whereas the truth is...
We would keep going a little bit. Keep going a little more.
We have a head-to-head comparison between 3 cohorts of people, tens of millions, hundreds of millions in some cases. Those who have been vaccinated, those who have caught COVID without being vaccinated, those who have caught COVID having been vaccinated, and we know the outcomes. We know them well enough to know that you're far better off being vaccinated and eventually catching COVID, as you will, than catching it without having been vaccinated. Catching COVID is not a strategy for becoming immune to COVID. It's just catching COVID, right? And those who survive will have some natural immunity. The jury's no longer out on that score. Now, it may be true that in certain populations, it is rational to worry that the potential side effects of vaccination are greater than the risk of COVID. For instance, I believe there are some data about teenage boys having a higher risk of myocarditis.
Let me just jump in here just with a technical point about this. Myocarditis is not unique to the vaccine at all. It is very relatively common in the context of getting the flu, having any type of virus infection. Just, so people should be aware of that. I was not aware of that. And I was talking to folks who know pediatric doctors, and that this myocarditis is, there's no evidence that there's more prevalence of myocarditis from the vaccine than there are from like the virus. But that's a nitpick point. I think his point remains. It's conceivable there are cohorts of people who, vaccine may bring some other side effects. But again,
a conversation not being suppressed by the man or whoever
right.
they are.
But just go on just a little bit more, because this is really fascinating to me. Just continue just for a second.
Teenage girls, certainly. I think it's a tenfold difference. And the risk may be high enough that it is in fact greater than their risk of becoming severely ill with COVID. The data I saw suggested it was kind of a coin toss there, but slightly in favor of not getting vaccinated. If those data hold up, well then, yeah, it may be rational to decide that 12-year-old boys shouldn't be vaccinated. But the general picture here is fairly well established. We know catching COVID is worse in almost every case that has thus far been tried than getting vaccinated for COVID. And from what I've seen recently, the data in favor of ivermectin seems increasingly dubious. So parsing all this should be left to the professionals, right? Again, I come back to my basic mystification around what Brett and Heather are doing. Why do this publicly? If you're going to make the personal choice not to get vaccinated based on your scrutiny of the data, great, make that choice. But why spend the better part of a year convincing people that they shouldn't get vaccinated? You can say that's not what you're doing, but that is in fact what you're doing. And that's what seems so irresponsible. The U.S. is now one of the least vaccinated countries in the developed world.
He goes on to say we are one of the least vaccinated countries in the developed world, and how dangerous this is. Now, there's 2 points here that I want to make. And, again, credit where credit's due. Someone just IM'd this, and this really is the point I was going to make. My brain hurts going from the last 5 years or so of Sam Harris to a man who all of a sudden understands the implications of his arguments could be negatively appropriated to society at large, or that honest debate can be weaponized by the disingenuous to toxify the discourse. And so this was my argument with Sam, whatever it was, 5 or 6 years ago, when, and he has since written in 2011, in 2006, I think it was, he wrote In Defense of Torture. That was the title of the piece that he wrote at Huffington Post, In Defense of Torture. It may have been an appropriation from his book. 2011, he addresses, I should have never written about this in my book. He never really actually talks about the In Defense of Torture at the Huffington Post. But nevertheless, and he says, and he basically says, I shouldn't do it because people misconstrued it, blah, blah, blah. But my point was always this: in the middle of a debate on torture that this country was having at that time, to do this thought experiment, which incidentally, the hypothetical is also a conspiracy in this way. There is never a situation where a president or an FBI person, can know that there's a ticking time bomb. It is simply they make a judgment that it is worth it for me to torture. And he says, I'm not saying it should be legal, but it is ethical. I don't even know what that means, because is it ethical to do an act that's going to have broader implications within his hypothetical? FBI tortures a guy, then it basically unleashes the ability of other FBI guys who are convinced that there is another bomb that they're going to torture. You can't just isolate it to that one situation in the real world, even in the hypothetical. But then introducing this question into a broader context in which there is a debate about torture, you are doing something you cannot deny.
Well, he's using the veneer of credibility by being philosophical to basically talk about a 24 scenario where there's a bomb ticking and what do you do? I mean, that was the famous debate there, and it's just so divorced from reality, but serves the function that you're exactly saying, to uphold those systems which are inherently immoral and then also racist. Talk about his bigger project, right, which I'm sure you will in a second. But what he did, talking about how Islamic ideology is fundamentally more violent or inherently more violent than other ideologies, he didn't take into the broader context, or he didn't fit his argument into the broader context of what was being done in this country at the time, which was the war on terror was, I don't remember exactly when he had these, when he came to the fore, but it was in the heights. So of the war on terror. So his entire rise to fame, the reason that he has a public platform was because he provided an acceptable face and an acceptable low NPR-like tone to talk about these very racist policies as if they were acceptable. It wasn't just torture; it was broader Islamophobia.
That is true, and I think the problems I have with his positions on Islam are slightly different from this, because I think what he's talking about right here, though, with what Brett Weinstein's doing, by sort of nibbling around the edges. Is what he was doing with torture. And on some level, he was doing, I guess, with Islamophobia, in that he's like providing, like, I think you're right.
Well, what he says is like the problem is with Brett is it's so insidious because he has the aesthetics of reason and he has all this attention to caveats and stuff like that. But that's the exact same thing as because the reason of what Brett is saying is the vaccines aren't safe. The reason of what was behind what Sam was saying is Muslims are dangerous.
Yes. I mean, literally, you can see like Sam has sections of his blog that were dedicated to the caveats. Yeah. But it is the primary thrust of what you're delivering, the caveats notwithstanding. And then the other thing I should also say is that it is, and I don't want to be petty here, but on one hand, you have a guy, and he's calling these proclamations that Brett and Heather are doing insane, I think he said at one point. Think about what the implications of these are. Has one person died because, I mean... didn't we do a story about like that?
We know of one.
Yeah, at least one.
They didn't get the vaccine. They ended up dying. Is it 5? Is it 10? Is it 100? Is it 1,000? I don't know. Does it need to be more than one? And he's still going to be, and he's not going to do a personal attack. This guy said that I was displaying psychopathic behavior because I was mocking Dave Rubin too much.
Well, who knows how many people that killed?
Exactly.
From laughter.
He didn't.
I mean, honestly, like, I sort of think I deserve an apology, but I'm going to.
But you notice how Harris says sociopath there, right?
Well, no. He was quoting. When he was saying sociopath, he was quoting the transcript from Brett's podcast.
The Crime of the Century.
The Crime of the Century.
All right, it's just
right. No, it's a little bit hard.
I was listening to a meditation app.
I know. There is a little bit of ASMR to the whole thing.
Almost fell asleep.
But the bottom line is, good for Sam Harris. It is. Again, I mean, I think we told you, but you didn't listen. And so there it is. I mean, this is, I hope that lesson, in the event that Sam Harris ever finds himself in that situation again where he wants to start doing hypotheticals about hot button political issues.
What does he do now, though?
I think he's quite successful.
He's a little bit upset about Biden's Afghanistan withdrawal, I think. So he might be a little bit back on the old train.
My point, though, is what does his political commentary now constitute?
I don't know. I think he's just a sort of I don't know.
It's just like a 422 layered nuance cake.
I mean, I don't know. It's interesting though. Like the IDW, Brett's gonna have to find a darker dark web now to talk about his ivermectin and anti-vax stuff.
Pitch black web.
We should also say that he also says that he reached out to Joe Rogan and told Rogan to correct his having Heather and Brett on now, which is also like, I should say, how is this different than what I did to Dave Rubin? Granted, I didn't speak as softly and I didn't go directly because I didn't have a direct line to Dave Rubin, but I had a problem with the people that Dave Rubin was platforming, many of whom I think Sam would agree are problematic now, and this was met with a proclamation that my behavior was sociopathic. And frankly, I deserve an apology, or at the very least, maybe a free podcast subscription.
Free?
I want comped.
I don't want to say this is what Sam Harris is doing, but as somebody who makes podcasts for a living, the AMA format is very good for a day that you haven't prepared a whole lot.
Oh, yeah.
And talking slowly is a great way to stretch out, say you want to hit a 30-minute time limit.
Oh, there's very little meat in there. He is fluffs. It's like, I can't stand delivery that's designed to make one sound super smart, but substantively there's very little behind the curtain, and he epitomizes that.
Folks, we're not going to have any more time for phone calls. I apologize. We've got still so much to do, and I've got Champagne Communist. Where do I file my complaint for being murdered by laughter from the Majority Report dunking on Dave Rubin and the IDW in general? And Josh from Tucson said, Sam Harris ASMR gave me a weird boner. Josh from Tucson, I'm missing Michael. He had the best Sam Harris impersonation. I know. There's so many. This is one of those things where it's just like, this is, how do we send this deep into heaven or the afterlife so that Michael can be sitting there enjoying it. I wonder if Michael actually did the editing on that, maybe, from afar. Speaking of having a problem with the Afghan withdrawal, Emma, do you want to do the honors here? Because I know that your Tulsi skepticism was...
It was very outrageous.
It was outrageous, and it was so cul-de-sac-y.
I know, right?
So cul-de-sac-y. Don't you appreciate that she is an anti-imperialist? She is anti-war, except for those Islamos.
Well, you know, the thing about it is that my lawyer parents told me that I need to stop Tulsi at all costs to keep the war machine going, which is why my commentary was so spicy.
Okay, please do the honors.
Yes, on behalf of the deep state, I present to you Tulsi Gabbard on Tucker Carlson's program with her take on the drone strike in Kabul that killed children and an Afghan aid worker when we were trying to target ISIS-K.
10 people.
Yeah.
Congresswoman, thanks so much for coming on. So you get to lie, I mean, this will not shock you because you've seen it so much, but you get to lie about the loss of human life, you get caught, and nothing happens to you? What kind of system is that?
I mean, this kind of accountability is critical. I want to point out first that anytime there are civilian casualties in war, it is tragic and terrible. Yeah. War is a terrible thing, and I think it's important for the American people to understand that Islamist jihadists are continuing to wage war against us. And the Islamist ideology, not the same as the religion of Islam.
I just want to, like, if somebody out there has whiplash,
I know.
I just want to explain.
Hard pivot.
I'm anti-war against the Islamists.
like, Tucker has made a very good point, in my estimation. Pretty low-hanging fruit.
Well, he sits to serve one agenda, and it's completely disingenuous, but sure.
Right. I remember all of the times he was talking about the drone attacks that Trump launched, which is maybe there should be some accountability for killing 10 civilians.
Mm-hmm.
And her response is, war is tough. Yeah. However, go ahead.
And first, him calling her Congresswoman. One of those tics of cable news people that talk to their friends. She's no longer a Congresswoman anymore. Yeah, she was off in wherever she was. What was she doing? She was in Special Forces mission. Cool. She's back now.
Yeah, well, and the imperialism she is against is Islamic imperialism.
Yep. All right, keep going.
And I think it's important for the American people to understand that Islamist jihadists are continuing to wage war against us. And the Islamist ideology, not the same as the religion of Islam, but this Islamist ideology, which is a political ideology that inspired the terrorist attacks on our country on 9/11, is the greatest threat that we're facing right now in this country and the world. It is the foundation of governance of so-called Islamic countries like Turkey and Iran and Saudi Arabia and Pakistan. And it's what's behind the discriminatory policies that they have in these countries against Christians, Hindus, Buddhists, atheists, and others. So as long as these Islamist jihadists are waging war against us, we have to work to defeat them militarily and ideologically.
Wait a second.
And militarily, we have two choices.
So she's saying that we have to go to war with them because they have discriminatory practices towards Christians and Hindus?
Oh, it's interesting she brings up Hindus, right? Given her cozy relationship with Narendra Modi, who wants to section off Muslims and treat them as second-class citizens. But go on.
I mean, there's no like I'm waiting for like the national security implications of what she's talking about. I mean, she didn't even say that. Like, where's the argument that it's even in our interests? She's also just so inartful with it, right? I mean, like, she was on there with the pretense of condemning the Biden administration, but she had to immediately. She was so eager to make the hard pivot to full-on Islamophobia that she didn't even fully transition away from the civilians dying. I mean, there's your anti-war candidate there.
Yeah, I mean, she's anti-war the way like Ron Paul is. I mean, maybe even worse.
The way
than Ron
Tucker
Paul.
Carlson rebranded himself as. That's why they work hand in hand, right? This is these same people that think she's anti-war are the same people that are duped by Tucker Carlson's faux populist rhetoric. They have zero
well, here's the question.
outside perspective that sees what this kind of talk serves.
Here's the question. Joe Biden got up in front of the UN today and said, we're not at war right now for the first time in 20 years. Now, of course, and Joe Biden has been droning less than Donald Trump, but we're still obviously droning people. We just killed 10 people. We're going to be there's no doubt in my mind, we're waging covert wars around the globe. Do people accept that? Do the so-called anti-imperialists accept Joe Biden's word at it? Because if they do, or if they don't, rather, how do you not have a problem with someone actively advocating to do those actions that Joe Biden is supposedly doing and still say that person is anti-war?
Well, first she condemned the deaths of civilians and then immediately, without context, pivoted to how Islamist ideology, which isn't a thing, is the greatest threat that our world faces. Like, please imagine having that myopic of a view of the world when you're supposedly, or at one point branded yourself as a progressive, a Democratic presidential candidate, a congressperson, when you don't see that U.S. imperialism over the past many decades, and imperialism in general, is what led us to this point. Like, you're an unserious person.
Bradley, can you, before we start playing again, back up to the point where she suggests military action against Islam, or these Islamists, for the folks that say, are you saying Tulsi's for war? I don't know what else military action.
It's just action. It's not war. She didn't say military war, Matt.
Okay, we'll just just leave it to the CIA.
It's kinetic action.
Attacks on our country on 9/11 is the greatest threat that we're facing right now in this country and the world. It is the foundation of governance of so-called Islamic countries like Turkey and Iran and Saudi Arabia and Pakistan. And it's what's behind the discriminatory policies that they have in these countries against Christians, Hindus, Buddhists, atheists, and others. So as long as these Islamist jihadists are waging war against us, we have to work to defeat them militarily and ideologically. And militarily, we have two choices in how we do that. Number one, we can continue to invade and occupy and nation-build in countries around the world, just as we did in Afghanistan, at great cost. Number two, we can take a targeted approach using airstrikes, using our special forces to go in and go after these terrorist cells. The reality is that the cost to the American people, the cost to our troops, the cost to civilians will be far less if we take this very targeted approach to go after these jihadist terrorist cells than if we continue making the very same mistakes that we saw in Afghanistan and other parts of the world of invasion, occupation, and nation building.
So you're in favor of these drone strikes. You're in favor of air attacks. You start off by giving lip service to the fact that it was a tragedy that, 10 innocent people died when we tried to retaliate against ISIS-K, and then go on to advocate for that same approach. You're not even coming on to do what Tucker asked you to do, girl.
I know it.
You're coming on and you're advocating for Biden's position, except way worse.
I would say this is, Donald Rumsfeld, bless his soul, I think would be very happy. I think he would agree. This is why we wanted that lighter footprint. We go in, we kill, we go out.
But this whole crowd, they were against Hillary Clinton. She's such a war hawk, right? She was in favor of the Iraq War and the Afghanistan War, and their motivation for opposing her wasn't entirely based on sexism, but there was an element to that. They supported a woman whose ideology in terms of international intervention is basically fundamentally the exact same. That's not an anti-war voice. She's a fascist in a different, like.
Her fascism is a little bit more associated with her
Hindu nationalism as what I was going for. But yeah, I mean, that's, at least right now, that's what she's trying to appeal to.
It's pretty impressive.
It's amazing how regularly she proves all of her critics right, particularly lately.
It's gotten easy.
Prairie Fire Kowalski. I can't believe you hung up on the calls. How is anyone supposed to get an agricultural report now? We will take your call tomorrow, Kowalski. I'm gonna have to write a lengthy report to post to the Left Reckoning post game. Best leftist show. Anyway, how's the apple harvest going? And seriously, do you get more powerful as the universe balances out during the equinox? Left is best. Let's go to some IMs. Greg Hampage. You should see all the billboards St. Vincent claiming they've gotten awards for having the best possible staffing grades. Rob from Albuquerque. The parliamentarian is the cornerstone of our parliamentary government. Oh, wait, we don't have a parliament. Sam's hanging Chad. So my company is bidding on an Amazon warehouse construction project. I'm responsible for putting together the estimate. Contract requires all subcontractors to work 6 10-hour days per week and 6 12s. Highly encouraged. Oh, and we have to erect a webcam to provide 24-hour access for the Amazonians to watch over us. Reading through this contract reminds me of that call you got from the third-party driver who called in last week. Crazy. Dictatorship of the proletariat. Sam, why do you assume that this situation isn't what Pelosi, Schumer, and Biden wanted when they have proved the opposite their whole career? You could admit that Dem leadership is not interested at all in passing progressive legislation. What is the advantage of Joe Biden coming out and staking his presidency on a bill that he doesn't want to pass? What advantage? Like, I got news for you. There is no benefit to Joe Biden for this.
Yeah.
Joe Biden could have come out and said, I want a $1.5 trillion bill, and I won the election, and that's what it's going to be. Joe Biden could just have the bipartisan infrastructure bill and be done with it. Like, I don't understand. Like, do I think they're feckless? Do I think that Nancy Pelosi desperately doesn't want an expansion of Medicare in the bill? Yes, which is why I don't think it's going to be in there. But
you don't think there's going to be the dental?
Well, I think there may be an expansion of benefits.
Well,
I don't think
that's dead.
But the idea that Joe Biden, whose presidency is essentially staked on this, you know, it's one thing to run against Donald Trump in the midterms when he's actually not running.
Yeah.
You're going to have more success running against Donald Trump if that's all you got when he's not running. But that's why. I mean, I'm sure there are provisions about it that Pelosi and Schumer don't want in there. But the whole bill to sink, like...
Yeah, what's failing is Biden's theory of change, frankly.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, why in the primary, Bernie's was like the only way to really address the stuff was an outsider to come in and really like try to lean on people, and who knows even if that would have worked. But this is a referendum on the insider approach.
Well, I also think that, look, they should have done this 3 weeks after they did the COVID relief bill. They should have just immediately turned around and do it. I was saying it at the time. You had the momentum. You don't give them time to rally, and you don't give the time for the corporations to come in and start to, fight back against it. I just don't think that Biden cares in the way that you think he cares. I think he cares about his own political fortune. I think he cares about his legacy. I think that's it. And to lose this fight, why would you choose to lose a fight like this? Like what benefit do you think? It's not going to help him electorally.
The IMer is, I believe, overvaluing the Biden administration's, the extent to which they're going to give like a performance to the left.
Well, the point is like, why do you need, if you're Joe Biden, why do you need to play 23-dimensional chess when you can just play 3-dimensional chess and get to the same point? and have it benefit you more. Like the idea, like we're going to make a big deal. We're going to push the $3.5 trillion bill. We're going to screw ourselves with the debt ceiling and the continuing resolution and all this.
And also a Democrat like Biden is always,
like, who's being faked out here?
Right. We never thought he would be able to sufficiently step up to the plate and meet this moment, right? But it is possible that Biden has learned from the past 10 years, and Democrats have learned something, not everything, but enough for them to say, okay, let's try and go big here.
I think like the limits of what these people will do is pretty good, but losing on purpose.
Yeah.
They don't have to lose on purpose. They could have started out at another point. I mean, they win what they want to, like. I
think it's an unsophisticated. I think it's just. I don't know. I don't want to say that.
There's a mix of like they don't individually they definitely not lose on purpose, but like we mentioned yesterday, they don't care if other Democrats lose.
Yeah, I think that everybody's out there for their own political fortune. Majority Report wardrobe coordinator Joe Manchin worried about inflation. Someone should show him what happened to the price of EpiPens. You don't need a fake MBA from West Virginia University. See how the price of those things has skyrocketed. Bo Fifth Burn. I tried the Air America Archives website has been taken over by some sketchy Chinese company, Placenta Care. But I was listening to the September 11th, 2001 show. It's crazy how quickly the tone of the show shifts from carefree to holy shit, still trying to be carefree. I tried finding the Majority Report Air America Archives.
Talking about Howard Stern?
Yeah, I don't know. We weren't on, obviously, at that time. Okay. Slappy Tubbs. Speaking about giving something to the plebiscites in order to gain their support, at least stave off falling poll numbers, I just got notice that I have to start paying my student loan again starting this coming January. Several strokes of the pen by Biden could make the midterm more competitive for Dems. That, of course, coupled with the continuation of the monthly child tax payment, which also. Why does Joe refuse to play good politics? Must be the wizard. We need to wait and see what happens with this. Well, first off, the extension of the child tax credit is in the reconciliation bill. Totally agree on that. It's going to be interesting to see if he does this executive order after this reconciliation fight. But I'm with you on that. I mean, I think he does have a ideological issue with like forgiving debt. But that speaks to my point of like, he doesn't have to pretend that he's going to and then not do it and come up with some like, I don't know, a contraption to make it impossible for him to do it. He's not doing it. Jonathan Arm said, the new Jeopardy champ who's won 22 straight episodes. Could you all see yourselves doing Jeopardy or a game show? Matt's lit knowledge is deep. And Sam, they have a special week where DC pundits and politicians play, where once Keith Olbermann won his episode. I'm not so great at that, but maybe. NJ Connor, I wish the progressives could compare the $3.5 trillion infrastructure bill with our $8 trillion military budget over the next 10 years. Good point. All right, 5 more of these. Radical black guy. Sam, I've always wondered, are you in the Trump was worse than Bush camp? That question seems to distinguish liberals from progressives. I don't know what that makes me, but do I think Bush was worse than Trump? I mean, I think by really any measure other than maybe,
he also had more time.
Low end. I mean, Trump, low end, but yes, Bush
was
killed
worse. Right, yeah.
Hundreds of thousands of more people. He lied us into a war. I mean, I think McConnell was worse during Trump than he was probably during Bush, but that was just sort of the evolution. But Bush has an administration far worse, in my estimation. I mean, Trump was horrible and was certainly worse, at least in terms of like generating racism, but I'm not convinced that wasn't a blowback of Obama, and I'm not convinced that Bush wouldn't have done the same thing.
And the conditions to allow Bush to be worse were
that's what I'm saying
there.
he got up and wanted to amend the Constitution to make gay people second-class citizens in this country. People forget that, but all right, 3 more. Jack your dad off. Oh, God darn it. Thank God for Sam understanding all of these parliamentary procedures and explaining it to an idiot like me. The whole show is felt like when you go over to a friend's house and they teach you a new board game.
It's spelled Jack Yurdadov.
Yeah.
Like a Slavic
Russian
name. Yeah.
Chantel, the caller was representative of so many progressives who have no clue how to go about campaigning and running online campaigns. I'm happy to help such candidates with video editing, ad making, which is my skill set. There's places where I can offer my services. Is there a place where I can offer services for such a candidate? I don't know if there is a warehouse for that, a clearinghouse for that. The PCCC does some training, but I'm not sure. All right, 2 more. Sam Seated. Credit to Sam Cedar when it's due. Since Trump started elections misinformation, he has come to the same side on issues like the big lie, vaccination, war, and misinformation. Of course, he's a dark gray character, but I'm glad to have him on our side on these issues than not. He has a following, even though dwindling one, because he is not drifting. I don't even follow what that means, but...
I mean, he's taking some stances against the IDW guys, Harris says.
He's saying Sam Cedar.
Oh, he must have meant Sam Harris.
Oh, okay. Smoking the Shire Loud. Logan Paul debating Candace Owens about whether... Okay, we already read that one. All right, final IM of the day. Travis from Pittsburgh, I believe, responding to Tulsi Gabbard. Actually, COVID and climate change are our biggest threats right now. I think that's pretty clear.
Mm-hmm.
I think somebody on the left of center would maybe say that.
Matt, Bradley, Emma, great job today. See you folks tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie bar. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my power